I'm Karen Travis. I'm a novelist and scriptwriter. My connection to Gears is that I joined the team for the first round of Gears games. Started with the novels, which were meant to inform the game. Ended up being lead writer on the third game. Wrote some comics. Left at the end of I say left. I mean, obviously I'm a freelance contractor. Ended that association after the last game for my trilogy, if you see what I mean, which was, I never remember the year, 2011, 2012, 2010, I can't remember. Anyway, haven't sort of looked at it, even thought about it, because that's the way I am with everything, even my own creator-owned stuff. If I'm not working on it, it's like gone. It's a complete blank. And then 2 or 3 years ago, the coalition asked me to do a little bit of work for them, and I'm sort of I wouldn't say it's quite getting the band back together because there's nobody from the original team left now. But so I've sort of reacquainted myself with what I would unashamedly call my favourite IP. I've never made any secret of it. It's the only one I would ever come back for, if you see what I mean.
So, how does it feel to kind of be like the whole like genesis of the extended universe of Gears?
It's an odd feeling. It's very odd. I mean, it's certainly not the only IP I've worked on, and I've worked quite on a few that I haven't even admitted I've worked on in public. So yeah. You will all know the ones that I've admitted to working on and have quite enjoyed at the time. I mean, Gears was very different. Gears was a very one-off experience. An entire, just getting into it, the number of things and coincidences and odd events that had to happen for me to say, okay, I'll do it. Really, I've sort of bored people senseless with these. It's one of these things that it was like the alignment of planets. It happens once in 1,000 years, and I just happened to be with the right people at the right place at the right time. And it was well, it was a very spooky experience and also a magical experience. And I'm not entirely sure how I feel about. Sorry, what was the phrase you used? Being the genesis of the expanded bit. Yeah, it was utterly random that I got into Gears at all. A publisher who I do not get on with very well because they owe me money. Um, asked me to would I look at doing a fairly urgent book, and it was like, oh yeah, look, once bitten, twice shy. Um, Apparently, and they hadn't told me who it was for because they're very cagey about things like this. They need whoever they were, who were a mystery to me at the time, were they had they'd had one book done, didn't want that. Can they try something else? So as I was the sort of oh, Karen will sort you out, she's a safe pair of hands sort of thing. They asked me, and I said I'm not going to even give you an answer till you tell me who it is. And they said Gears of War. Now, bear in mind that when I was writing franchise fiction, I kept myself almost in purdah. I didn't look at other IPs or anything because I can't write something that I have an opinion on. Because I'm a journalist, I've got to come to everything new. I've got to do my own exploration of it. And yeah, people often say to me now, wouldn't you like to write for? I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that people know I like. People know that I like things like Golden Kamuy, the anime, and things like that. They say, wouldn't you like to do something like that? Well, no, because it would spoil my viewing enjoyment. So I didn't know anything about Gears of War. I didn't look online because I wasn't sure whose opinion I would trust on this. But I did know Jerry Hawkins from Penny Arcade, and I just sent him a note saying, Jerry, no names, no pack drill. If I said Gears of War to you, what would your reaction be? And he said, it's Travis Town, do it. So I thought, right, he would not lie to me, and I utterly trust his judgment. Great guy. Then I searched online. Now, this is the really freaky bit. Sometime earlier, because I've been used to newsroom noise, I like to have some sort of background burbling sound, voice sound in the back. It was at a time when I still had a TV, and the TV was turned very low, but it gave me that newsroom noise so I could go on with writing. And I was typing away, and there must have been something that distracted me in my peripheral vision. I looked at the TV, and there was this, what I took to be a games video. And well, you will know which one it is. It's some guy running through this deserted city in this unfeasibly large armor. And I just sat there mesmerized and thought, I want to know what happens next. what's that cherub head doing? Why is it deserted? What are those things? So I was fascinated. When it ended, I didn't even see it come up as Gears of War or anything. That obviously that was a Mad World promo, as I later found out, and I just forgot about it until fast forward again to the immediately after the conversation with Jerry, was just to type in Gears of War, and the first thing that came up was that promo, and I thought, much as I hate the publisher, I've got to do this because I want to know what happens. And fortunately, we just got on really well with Epic from the get-go, particularly Mike Capps. Absolutely frank with me, and I said, all right, what do you want? Well, it's about Aspho Fields. I said, all right, tell me about the Battle of Aspho Fields. And he said, well, it happened at Aspho Fields. Marcus's best buddy Carlos got killed there. And that's it. You do the rest. Knock yourself out. And that pretty well summed up the rest of the relationship. Is that the sort of joy of Epic was that they didn't make the mistake that so many IPs make. They did not try to put in too much detail, because I guarantee, and I've seen it happen too many times, the more detail you try to put in because you think it's cool at the time, the harder it will come back and bite you in the ass at a later date.
Mm-hmm.
So, just as much as you need to make your primary product work, be it a game or a movie or whatever. And they were very good at that. And my job was to come in and flesh out everything else, because obviously they understood the difference between a game story and the sort of wider universe, which was great. So that fitted in with me perfectly, and they just let me do it basically. We didn't know. I mean, a lot of things were not set in concrete at that stage, although I knew right from the start that Adam was going to meet his maker at the end. We hadn't quite worked out why, but that's what happened. That's what we worked out during the third game. And it was just an absolutely blissful experience of being completely involved with every stage of everything. So I knew what was going on, and they wanted the books to inform the game. That was always the intention. Most IPs will hold books and novelists at arm's length. Now, fair enough, a lot of novelists cannot do. Don't necessarily understand other media. I am lucky that I've come from a TV background, a journalism background, and I actually think visually, and I understand why games need different things. So I've been able to move between different media, comics, games, long form fiction, short form fiction, without too much trouble. But it just enriched itself, and it's one of those rare experiences where, well, when I said initially it was like the alignment of planets, that you knew this was a very rare event that would only happen once in 1,000 years or something, that it was absolutely everyone you needed in the right place, right time, right IP, right amount of work for me to pick up from. And if I just described it with one line, it was almost like there was a hive mind. People were absolutely on the same page for everything. That is exceptionally rare. If you, well, you can imagine. I would leave you to imagine just how much disagreement there is in other organisations. But
Oh yeah.
everyone had this same vision, and you know, there are lots of weird little spooky moments where I'm not sure how it happens with human brains. But it was almost like we had all once lived in this place for real, had forgotten everything, and now we were all remembering it and remembering the same things. Now, a cognitive scientist can probably work something out from that. I still haven't worked it out fully, but there were the weirdest sort of coincidences. I picked a random name. I mean, this was a small one. I picked a random name for one of the UIR helicopters, and I called it an Azura. And someone came back to me and said, we've actually just picked Azura for the secret island. And the chances of that are very remote. And then it got even stranger. On the third game, there was some concept art for Prescott's office, and when it would have been a couple of years earlier at that stage, I think, when I was writing Aspho Fields, one of the early scenes was Hoffman going into Prescott's office, and I'm one of these people. I have to be able to see things in 3 dimensions and walk the character through it. I do not even plan plots, really. I build the characters, or else I develop characters that I've been given, I develop them further, and then I let them loose and see what happens. So part of that is literally almost standing behind the character as they walk in. So Hoffman goes into Prescott's office, and I have to be able to see the whole office in my head. It doesn't go on the page. Very little goes on the page for that particular scene. I don't describe it, but I know what it looks like. Absolutely. Anyway, I imagine this fairly ornate office, drapes, expensive carpet, that sort of thing. And I knew all the colours because I always see it in colour. Anyway, 2 years or whatever it was later, working on the game, someone showed me their visual of Prescott's office. Now, and they hadn't read the book. Sorry, they had read the book, but of course the information wasn't in the book. It was still in my head. And I looked at the office and said, I don't think that's the right pattern on the carpet. And then we sort of did a double take as like, that was the only difference between what the artist had imagined and what I'd imagined. Was that it was either I'd seen it as a Chinese Tianjin type pattern and he had seen it as Indian type pattern. And when you think about that, that was the only disparity that we were both effectively looking at the same picture. And that was a real Twilight Zone moment. And I thought, no, there's a logical explanation for this, but that was very freaky. And I always regale people with that story. So, as I say, that's a very old story, but it still remains my memory to this day. And that's one of the things that make Gears great. And also, everything I needed to know about Gears in terms of the characters, I could get from the visuals. They were that good. Do not underestimate the power of the art of Gears. I am someone who takes visual cues. I'm used to interpreting pictures. I'm probably worse than some Air Force interpreters, for aerial photography and things like that. But I could I look at a few frames of something and it told me exactly who those characters were and how they got on with each other. And that's astonishing. That tells you the richness of this world, and that's why I absolutely loved it. It was just done so well and so lovingly by so many people that it was alive, and I could work within that. And I was prepared to throw myself wholeheartedly into it, which I did. I'm not sure that answers your question, but that's definitely
it,
the
it
sort
answered
of.
quite a few of my questions.
Yes,
um
don't be afraid to tell me to shut up because I do go on a bit.
oh no, it's perfect. It's perfect. We love it. So you've mentioned that you like to stay as far away from like the specific piece of media as possible while you're working on it. Have you ever engaged with the series after you were done like writing for it and everything like that? Like have you ever attempted to play the games or look at gameplay or anything?
What I meant by staying away from it is I stay away from new stuff. I will only look at. Sorry, it should be in the past tense because I don't do it anymore other than for Gears. If I know anything about an IP, then I really can't come to it fresh. I'm completely immersed in it while I'm working on it, but once I stop, then I don't look at anything else. I just stop. It just ceases to exist for me. That's just the way my brain works, I'm afraid. And as I say, I do it with my own creator-owned stuff. Fans write to me and have queries about a series I did about 20 years ago. Now, even allowing for the passage of time, I don't remember the characters. I'd have to reread it again, and then I go back into their brain. I've got an excuse for this, which is because I write by dissociation. I didn't plan to be a novelist. It was someone else's suggestion, and I really wanted out of the job I was in badly, and I needed a replacement salary. So I went into it in a very businesslike way, very cold way. Uh, people do sometimes. People who want to be writers don't like well, I say don't like, they're clearly disappointed when I tell them how I got into being a novelist because it is so mechanistic and so cold and so pragmatic. I didn't starve in a garret. I didn't have a pile of rejection slips. I just did a business plan after someone had said, you could try that, have you thought of doing a business plan for it? And I thought, how hard can it be? And I do have quite a few colleagues who've done the same thing in different genres. Is like, damn, I need money. What else can I do? I know, I just tried banging out a novel, and it was that sort of level. It was that sort of level, except I didn't even think of it. This other person did. Sorry, I've lost my thread there. What was I going on about? Sorry, I just got distracted by my own love of filthy lucre. Uh, it's about the relationship with what you're working on. Once I stop working on it, because I dissociate, I go back into my own brain. Uh, in order to write, I've got to be in the characters' heads to see what they see, so that I see how they interact. And I really do mean that. It is a complete dissociation. I do have medical science to back me up on that because they've proven it with actors by doing brain scans. Manchester University in Canada a few years ago wired up some actors while they were reading parts around the table. Of course, they get really into it. And I always had a feeling this was true because an actor told me this. One of the Star Wars cast told me this when we were at a gig, and I explained. We were talking about how we tackled Star Wars basically, and I said, "Well, this is how I write," and he said, "Oh, that's method acting." He said, "This is what we do." He said, "You completely switch off and become." Yeah, exactly. Well, when Manchester University did these brain scans on actors while they were reading, they found that, put very crudely, the bit of your brain that is you and is conscious of yourself goes dark, and another part of the brain lights up. They really do suppress self, and that's exactly what I do. So I've got to be able to be in that character's brain in order to get them to move. So I've got to see where they are, and I've got to think in their heads, and that means I think thoughts that aren't mine, and I see things I wouldn't normally see. When I come out of that and I'm back to me, I see them very differently. It's taken me years to see the Gears characters really cold. And it has been years. It's been, what's it been, 12, 13, whatever, 14 years. Sorry, my maths isn't good today. So it just sort of ended there for me. I didn't, and I still haven't looked at the fourth and fifth games. And I haven't looked at Judgment or any of those. I haven't done any of that. So as far as I'm concerned, I mean, six is just a follow on, is part of the original, if you see what I mean. So that's why I won't be answering questions about Judgment 4 and 5 because I haven't a clue what's. Well, I haven't a clue. Fans have told me very big headline stuff, but not detail. But I have to then make an effort to get back into things. That's true of everything that I do. It's not just because it's a game. It's not just because it's someone else's IP. I do it with my own as well.
You said that you don't keep up with the series obviously after being done with it like you said. Do do you know about Kate Diaz at all? Like, has a fan told you about that?
No, no, oh, no. Someone mentioned Kate, but I know nothing. I know nothing. I
Like,
know nothing.
um, surprisingly, big shock. Marcus isn't the main character as of right now. In the current timeline, up to the present, Marcus is like a supporting role character. Not knowing anything about the story, does that seem kind of like surreal? Kind of like a character that's been built up for so long is kind of just like a side character helping somebody else now.
Given how much well, gosh, you've put me on the spot there. Uh, Given how much there was of the story, I mean, at the end of three, I had a whole long list of thoughts in my head about what happens there, what happens with that, what happens with that. I I would have thought there were probably about another 20 games to do to get to the stage where he wasn't important. Um, yeah, well, because everything I see about Gears is the dynamics of that four-man squad, which is extraordinary when you break it down. And I've broken it down even more now. Sorry, just to put this in context, because people are listening thinking, God, why on earth is she even going on about now? As I say, 2 or 3 years ago, the coalition said, can you do some consultancy work for us, which is it's about getting the characters right, and it's about giving them advice on characters, dialogue, that sort of thing. Because I probably know the characters better than anybody, if you see what I
Mhm.
mean. I've certainly gone more deeply into that particular squad. I could go and do their shopping for them. I really could, yeah, without even knowing. You know exactly what they'd buy in the supermarket. It's that level, and they're not they're not necessarily the way they look, and some of them are quite painful to get a bit too close to. Now, I never wrote Marcus type third person POV. What I always do for all my books, and he's the one exception, is that every single character you see it through their eyes, and I normally have about 6 to 8 in my own novels. And I think there's probably something like that in the Halo books as well. A lot of characters, but the one rule that Mike Capps at Epic gave me, he said, "You can't do that in Marcus. We need him to be a bit distant." And I thought, I've never done this before. I got a bit scared, but I did it. The reflection of him in everyone else, and they all see him differently, and it worked. So that's another great bonus from Gears is that it pushed me outside my comfort zone on what was already an established style that I knew I could sell. But looking at that squad, I mean, whichever analysis you put on it now, and because I had, here's a confession, I had to reread all my own books because I didn't remember any of it. You know, it really was. I mean, obviously I remember some high spots of Gears, but the real nitty gritty stuff that got down to us, I was reading these books as me, not remembering the characters bits, you know, because I mean, when I'm reading the book relatively fresh, I'm automatically back in that character's head. When I'm not in that character's head, I just sat there thinking, did I do this? I went back to the manuscripts, yet not a word changed. Yes, you did it, Karen. You actually said that. And some of them just shocked me rigid. I mean, reading the slab again, effectively the prison one, that I'm just horrified by how grim it was and how broken Marcus is in that. And you still don't see inside his head. And that reading all those books again, I thought this is I must have seen it at some level back in the day that this squad of 4 very odd people, well, no, actually, 3 odd people and a normal guy. Dom is the only normal one in it. Normal, blue collar, salt of the earth, family guy. Normal. The guy you need. The other 3 have all got issues, although Cole's got fewer. But you've got 3 immensely wealthy men, plus a guy who hasn't got 2 halfpennies to rub together. And somehow they make a squad. 3 immensely wealthy men. And I've only looked at that now and thought, you know, they've all lost vast fortunes. They were all rich for different reasons. I mean, Marcus and Baird, because they came from wealthy families, wealthy, almost aristocratic sort of lineage. You got Cole, who's just, you know, working class guy with a phenomenal talent, who made a fortune in a very short period of time. One of the world's best thrash ball players, you know, the sort of Messi of Sarah almost. And when you look at that, I think, how on earth do they work together? And yet they do. And then you see, I just deconstructed all the dynamics, all the psychological dynamics again. And that for me is the fascinating bit. When I say that, people say to me, oh, you must have read psychology at uni. No, this is a journalist's meet and drink. Knowing people well enough to be able to predict what they do next and how they interact with each other. Marcus and Dom I mean, I'm not sure how much has already been shown of E-Day, but Marcus and Dom, as an interesting relationship post ASFO, is that the primary relationship is Marcus with Carlos. Dom's the younger brother, and although he's one of the friends, you know, you're very clear from the time that Marcus and Carlos meet at school that's the main relationship. And when Carlos dies and tells Marcus, look after Dom, Marcus then instantly assumes that as a different relationship, that he's going to be the big brother. At some point, him and Dom have got to get that straight, because Dom isn't the primary friend. The link between them is still Carlos, dead or alive. That's the bridge at that stage, and it is for quite some time afterwards. Go back to the sort of original stuff, Baird and Cole. I worked them out from one cinematic, about 2 or 3 seconds of a cinematic, which told me everything about them. Sorry, I'm just remembering, a friend of mine said, Karen, you know you're imagining all this, don't you? I said, no, it's there. Look, it's there. Look at that body language. And they go, Karen, you were paid to make this up and you are making it up. Just accept it. But no, I still think it's there. There's a scene where I can't remember what the particular creature was, but I keep wanting to say Leviathan, but it's a ground-based one. It's vast. They have to fight their way out because it swallowed them, and they come out through the abdominal wall, and there's guts and bone and muck everywhere. I think it's in Gears 2. I'm very blurry now, but there's Marcus and Dom in the foreground, info dumping for the next level, and in the background you've got Cole and Baird facing each other, picking gunk and gore off each other's armor, and the body language is just, these are 2 equals. These are two equals who totally respect each other, and neither feels demeaned by having to clean the other guy up. And apart from the fact that that said to me that Cole really does respect Baird, and Baird's suspended his general disbelief about humanity to like Cole, is that they are two guys who are really at the top of their game and they respect each other. As I say, my friend said, that is absolute garbage. You're just making that up. Well, it's there. I swear it's there.
Upon rereading the series, do you have a favorite character from Delta Squad? And if you do, did it change from when you were writing the novels?
I don't tend to have favourite characters or favourite books. I never have had, and that is a consequence of having to be in each character's head. I'm not writing them, watching them. I am being them, and then I step outside. Half of them I would shoot on sight. Of the remaining ones, if they moved in next door, I'd probably burn the house down and move. There are very few I mean, some I'd say, if they existed in real life, I would probably get on with them fine. I mean, people assume that if someone is a prominent character in a book, that I've got some positive view towards them. I mean, going way back to my very first novel, City of Pearl, which is the first of the West Side series, there is a character who is a disgraced police officer. Most readers thought she was the heroine, and I said, "You do realise that she's a monster, don't you?" I only had 2 readers in the last 20 odd years email me and say, "She's not one of the good guys, is she?" I said, "Nope." I mean, I didn't set out to make her a good or a bad guy, just that's the way she is, and people make their own judgments. But I could not have stood that woman in real life. It would have come to blows, and it always shocks readers when I say that. I said, "Well, just because the point is, everyone gets what they want out of a book. We see it through our own filters. We don't see everyone the same way, and we don't see it the same way throughout our lives. So, um, I wouldn't. I'm not talking about a sort of weak moral relativism. I know what I believe as me, but I'm not me when I'm writing the books. So, in terms of characters I like, I enjoy the process of the challenging ones. I really enjoyed writing Prescott because of he's very, very careful with language. And this is a man driven by duty rather than by money, because he's got the money. But he's been brought up in this fairly rigid social structure, noblesse oblige and all that. His father brought him up to believe he had this privilege. He had money, and he'd come from an old family, and he owed the nation. He owed the people his service. And he goes into politics. He probably doesn't even want to do it. I don't think he does want to do it. There's points where he really wishes he didn't. But the precision of his language, because he will not lie. He still doesn't tell you the truth, but he doesn't lie either. And he walks this tightrope the whole time, and every single word is carefully chosen. Now, I've worked with politicians for far too many years in the past. And it was just, yes, I understand this creature. I do understand why he's what he is. And I really felt sorry for him, because in the end, you look at all the choices that he had, and they're either bad or much worse. He could not have done a thing. Well, certainly not by the time Adam Phoenix had sat on it right up to E-Day. No one could do anything. But yeah, you can probably tell that I had as me, I have a great deal less sympathy for Adam, but it does make the story more fascinating. That he thinks he can fix everything. But you have to wonder. He obviously doesn't want. The whole question is about what his wife was doing. There's loads of stuff around that. It's interesting when you do the POV for someone like Adam, because he is deluding himself. He's not sure why he did what he did. He only knows that it was a bad thing. He doesn't know what else he could have done. He's always finding reasons why it was the only choice he could make. And he tortures himself like this over and over and over. And he's punishing himself, which is what made his atonement inevitable. And we're saying, we sat around for 3 saying, how do we actually off Adam? And as I said, he would experiment on himself. That's his atonement. He is so riddled with guilt that he would do it, and he does. So there you are. I mean, he makes sense. I don't think I'd get on with Dom. I mean, he comes across as a great guy in the books, but he's ever so rude and judgmental. He really. There are points where he even admits to himself that he just he's so wrapped up in the father role even after he loses his kids that he does still try to be a father, this sort of stern father, and he does it to Baird. And he actually recognises he does it to Baird, but Baird never comes back at him. Normally, Baird gives as good as he gets, but he never says, "You're not my dad," because Baird knows that you dare not talk about his kids because he's lost them. So that tells you as much about Baird as it does about Dom. But I always think when I reread all this stuff, I thought, Dom, just wind your neck in a bit, mate. Stop, soften a bit. And that was before he lost his kids. So writing Cole was interesting because it was knowing the point at which he becomes the guy who will lay down the law. He doesn't throw his weight around. He's got both size and fame. So he's got quite a lot of weaponry. And it's how he uses that because he's so easygoing and he's been happy to have his fantastic career and loves playing thrashball, and then it's taken away from him. It doesn't make him bitter. He loses his family. He deals with it. It breaks his heart every single day, but he deals with it. I suppose, if you look at him and Baird, what sums up the relationship there is that he, obviously this is, and it's too late for spoilers for the books, but and I'm sorry if people haven't read it, but where Cole first meets Baird, when Baird's having his head shoved down the toilet and getting basically seven shades of it kicked out of him, and could end in a fractured skull. And he steps in and says, "Gentlemen, please, can we desist from this?" Is that Baird gives him his usual lip back, but Baird has noted that this is someone who's got his back for the first time ever. And then a few days later, when Cole is on his first mission and Baird's on his first mission too, and he's grumpy, Cole makes a point. He sees Baird on his own while they're getting into the Ravens, and he thinks, "I can't leave him there." And he's got the rest of the squad around him, treating him like the star that they still think he is. And he looks at Baird and he says, "Baird, are you going to stand there all day? Come and join us." I think it's Alonso who says, "You know that?" And he says, "Yeah, he's fine." And Cole knows exactly what he's doing. Cole has taken his own power as this famous guy who's basically charmed the whole squad. And he's effectively saying, "Baird's mine. Don't you dare touch him." Okay? He's under my aegis. Now, a few minutes later, they are engaging with grubs for the first time. Cole fumbles his reload. He's a dead man. And then he realizes it's not him shooting or trying to shoot. It's someone behind him. And it's Baird. Baird has followed him. Baird literally has his back and saves his life. And they both then do the usual sort of sarcastic male thing, but they've bonded. It's like, "I recognise you. We're going to be a team now." And and that was nice because it was two highly unlikely blokes, and you think, why do they get on it? And it is because there's a strong streak of loyalty there, returned favours and loyalty, and also they respect each other for being really, really good at what they used to do.
When you do write a book or when you are making these characters, like, do you care more about their charisma and like how they act, or do you care more about the situation they're actually going through to influence how they act?
There's only one path through any of this for me, and that is, who are these people? What are they really like, and how will they behave under stress? Because I treat them as soldiers, and that's why I used to be a defence correspondent. I come from a naval town. I've done a very tiny bit of reserve service myself, very small, very, very small. I actually set out generally when I started writing, when I had to pick a subject. Now, bear in mind, sorry, this is backtracking a bit, but it will put it in context why the military is so central to what I write. Military and politics is so central to what I write, and making the characters within it believable and realistic to function in that world. As I say, I had no intention of being a novelist. I had no great story in me waiting to get out. I thought, and I didn't have 20 years to study the Sengoku period of Japan to write Japanese thrillers and things like that. I had to pick what I knew. I could just about bluff my way in most STEM subjects, and I knew defence and I knew military people. I knew the mindset. I've steeped in it. And I thought, right, okay, a bit of military science fiction. I want to have a bit of military science fiction, which is how I started. And the only thing I set out to do, I mean, there's no message in my books. That's why people are always shocked when they find out what I'm really like and what my politics are, because they couldn't. I don't write polemic. I write reality. I can only approach a story as a real situation. I get the first thing I do when I'm writing a book is deciding where it's set, not characters. Where and when is this happening? Is it 15th century Venice? Is it an abandoned space station 500 years time? Is it a completely alien society? Is it talking spiders? You know, I pick something like that and I go, okay, what kind of people would naturally be in that environment? I mean, bear in mind, if you're a journalist, you meet far more people across a most mind-boggling range of circumstances and stations in life than other people do. You have got the pick of humanity to choose from. Inside my head are all these data points, millions and millions of these data points I juggle about human behavior. And when I think of a character, I think, right, I need someone who does that would be in that role. That character forms within about 30 seconds. I fleshed them out after that, but they're instant. And I've never really worked out. It's taken me nearly 20 odd years to work out what I think happens cognitively there. Is that I take one or two key factors, and then there is a probability thing going on about what the most likely partial characteristic that goes with that one and that one is. And eventually it becomes a sort of molecular structure. You know, you've seen these sort of plastic molecular structures that click together. Uh,
Hmm.
that's how it that's how it feels in my brain. So these are real people, but they're not based on real people. I've got very strong feelings about that. I know a friend who's done everything. Every one of his characters is someone with a serial number filed off, and he's made a fantastic career out of it. But I can't do that. I've got to construct them from scratch. Or if I'm given a few key things from, shall we say, a medium that doesn't require the detail. Games don't. Movies don't normally. You can pick that few things out, and then you can put a lot more in there and explain them. Because there are many paths to certain behaviours. As I say, that's a journalist thing. When I look at a character, when I first came to Gears, I'm talking about 4 soldiers from very different backgrounds in a society that's probably more European than American. I mean, that's one of the things. Conversation with Cliff, he said, the whole architecture and the whole vibe of the society was more European. Faded grandeur was the phrase he used, and yeah, I could understand that you've got two guys from families who've been there, like both of them predate the coalition. Sorry, they predate the coalition of older governments. Sorry, that's what I specifically meant. That so it's confusing with the developers. They've got a whole lot of baggage with them, and you think that they're actually in enlisted roles. They're not officers. Now both of them, both Baird and Marcus, would automatically in most societies with that amount of money and that pedigree have taken commissions, but they don't. Bear in mind they're soldiers, and knowing that however much the technology changes, soldiering, particularly infantry, has not changed since the Roman era or even earlier. It is a young man's game, and it's about being willing to do violence up close and personal. It is hard, and yet these guys have effectively normalize that. They're not then you don't see any of the privilege, which is why I thought that's a bit odd. Well, why does Marcus do that? Why is Marcus friends with Carlos? We know, why is he not friends with his neighbor Baird? Because they would all live in that barricades area, because that's the rich guys part of town. They're completely different. They've had parallel lives, but with sliding doors. If you've seen the movie Sliding Doors, about the one thing that changes, that takes you off on a totally separate path, and if it had gone the other way, you'd have a totally different future. They really are the sliding doors parallel universe people. They're very different. Obviously, no child comes into the world as a blank sheet. There is a lot of people still believe that we bring stuff with us when we're born and it's genetic, and then the world happens to us and those things affect us in different ways, and we make choices that we can make, but some choices are already there because we were born with them. Is that clearly Marcus and Baird are totally different people. Now, I have to make sense of what's already been in the game, but that's easy. That's the easy bit. There is the thing about them. There's nothing in there really, regarding the way that they would have to behave to make sense of it. I mean, Marcus, he's got. I mean, both Marcus and Baird have parents who are present but not involved. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
We see the distance between Marcus and his mother particularly. Good grief! I mean, why did she bother? Um, she's very much wrapped up in herself, and even Adam accepts that. But even when he's trying to do something, there's a. I read it again and it broke my heart. Was when he's back in the Pendulum Wars. He's about to deploy to Kashkur, and he goes for a walk in the garden with Marcus, as Marcus knows Daddy's going away again. He's deploying, and he's quite upset. And he has this conversation, and he says, "You're going away. I want to be a gear too." And I mean, Adam's not stupid. He realizes that he's painted this picture of something that's more important than the family. Sorry, when he thinks, I know what I need to do for my son. I need to go. I need to fight this war and then come back and make a weapon of mass destruction or stop everybody else ever having to go to war. He doesn't think my boy needs me. I've got another job offer. Because Marcus needs a 5-year-old boy needs his dad now, not in 15 years when he's got the Octus Medal or whatever. And that just showed me how detached he was. I'm not saying they didn't love Marcus, but they certainly had no idea how to parent. And it's just sad because you can see him getting more and more withdrawn. You watch that all the way up to the point he loses cast. I mean, that's why he goes looking for friends. I mean, I think Adam recognizes he needs some friends because the number of times that he's sort of alone in that house because Mum's gone off and doing whatever she's doing down the hollow, which is it's just awful. I was getting really angry reading this. I was thinking I should have called Child Services about this woman. I really should have. Child Protection Services. Um, there are little tells in that is that, and I didn't even realise that I'd done them. Was that Marcus throughout the books shows that he knows about trees. He knows the botanical names for things, and he knows how to deal with the pond in the prison. And actually, Reeve finally asked him and said, didn't you have garden? No, he said something like, "Oh, you must have had a huge house. Yeah, I've seen your estate. It's huge. I bet you had a lake." He seemed to know a lot about this, and he said, "I was on my own a lot. I used to watch the gardener." And back to the time when he's 5 years old and he doesn't want Daddy to go to war again, and Adam's walking around the gardens, well, the park with him, because it's a really big garden, and Marcus is pointing out all the names of the trees, botanical names, Latin, well, would have been the Tyrant equivalent of Latin. And all Adam thinks is, what a clever boy. He doesn't think, why does he know all this? It's because it's a gardener who keeps him company. And it's just, when that penny dropped with me, is that's what I'd seen through his eyes. It really upset me. Pathetic, really. Yeah, it did. It is desperately upsetting. On the other hand, you've got Baird, who is a much more robust character psychologically. You only got to see what he's comes through. Is that what sort of family says, "I'm going to cut you off without a penny unless you join the army," because that's what we do. And the war wasn't on. Well, I mean, an 80-year war is normalised. The Pendulum Wars were normalised. That was an economic reality. I mean, peace must have really put a lot of companies out of business. Fortunately, it was only 6 weeks, but you know what I mean. It's do not give up your shares yet. But he was clearly not treated well, and he certainly doesn't perceive it as being treated well. But you never really know what went on. You only hear him say, "I remember this," and he'll just say, "My mother demanded I did this," and it's clear Mum ran the family. She was the one with the pedigree. And his father sort of fitted in with it. But he obviously learned at a very early age that nobody was coming to save him. So he just shut off and he just started doing what he did best because he's academically exceptionally able and fantastic engineer, and he just took refuge in that and just made more and more of that. But he definitely had taken a decision. You can see from the way he treats people in the game that one is that his mouth is a barrier. It's almost disconnected from his body in a way because he says terrible things, but he does quite kind things. He's always in there. He's always got someone's back. He never shies away from a fight. He does actually know when to shut up. Possibly not as often as he should, but that's his defence. That's his appossomatic colouring. That's his yellow and black stripes. Don't come near me. I can't handle this. Go away. And that's his defensive barrier. But he actually comes through it a lot better than Marcus does. I just couldn't get over how broken Marcus is at the end of it all. But then, what else could you do? He's lost everything.
Mm-hmm.
He's lost absolutely everything. But then Dom has lost even more. And the whole set. So I hate saying this, but I did say it to someone at a meeting. It it took a while for the penny to drop, but the entire Santiago bloodline is gone, and the last two brothers sacrificed himself for Marcus. So how do you live with that? How does he's got to think that. But obviously, because I couldn't get inside his head, I wasn't allowed inside his head, which actually is a blessing, because it would have upset me terribly, I think. Because at some point, these things catch you in sort of unguarded moments, and this is the problem. It's almost like anime in a way. When I'm watching anime, your guard's down, and things, because it looks like a cartoon. You're sort of relaxed. You're not waiting for tragedy, and then it just punches you in the face, and you're absolutely devastated by it. And I think there's a certain amount of that with Gears, is that when you really look at it cold and seriously, it's the triumph of human will. I mean, it's a triumph of courage and brotherhood and all that. But oh my, the price. The price was very, very high.
With your stories, you said that you don't really put like a message or like a political lean really to anything in there. It's just like
Uh,
soldiers being soldiers going through what they're going
yeah.
through. Is there anything you tackle as you're in the heads of these characters, or I guess like experiencing what
Oh
these
yes,
characters are
yes,
doing?
yes, yes. I mean, you absolutely have to. I mean, it's why they think what they think. I
Mm-hmm.
have to go through the whole thought process with them, and they all see the world differently, and they all think there are different risks. There are no absolute external rules for it. I couldn't write a character otherwise. I would not be able to tell any sort of story. I wouldn't be able to get past the first page if I didn't have one character thinking one thing, and then another character thinking another, and working out. I don't even need to work out who's right. I mean, that's not saying I don't know, because when I step out of it, I've got extremely strong feelings about all sorts of things, some of which I've had to change my mind about when I've been in the minds of characters who have different views. That is the interesting thing. I don't write the books write me. And I mean, there's some really big ethical issues that I've thought, blimey, I hadn't looked at it like that before. I need to change my mind in the real world. And yeah, that genuinely happens. The fact that I won't say what it is will tell you it's a highly controversial one, but
Mm-hmm.
it's about making three-dimensional people as real as I possibly can so that they make the decisions. And you just, I don't even need to think about it. I know where the conflicts will be. I know the arguments that they will have within themselves about should I do this, should I not. I mean, Hoffman's a classic. He wasn't quite an antagonist, but he added something. And I said to Mike Capps, "Do you mind if I change him a bit?" I said because he's just I need him. I need him for the books because he's got that time scale and he can look at two wars. And he has moved between the worlds. He has been an NCO who then got a commission. He'd come up from the ranks, which in a European style traditional stoical sort of society like Tyrus would have been quite something. And he's always afraid of failure because he's out of his class. I mean, Marcus is out of his class and has gone the other way. That's the interesting dynamic between those two. Is they're both something they're not. They're both something they're not born to, and whatever it is they've settled into the new identity, but they're still who they were at their core. I mean, even in the slab, Marcus is still concerned that you don't just randomly kill psychopaths. However much they
Mm-hmm.
ask for it. There's the rule of law, and there's what do we become. Whereas Hoffman is I swore an oath that I would do whatever I was told to hold. I would hold something. I would give my life as long as I am needed. And he takes decision after decision that break him. That when all the pressure's off him, he thinks, well, I hate myself for what I've had to do. I mean, I was thinking of Anvilgate and what happened to his wife. You know, he did the right thing, and it was totally the wrong outcome in some ways. So yeah, I mean, I have to go through that. There's no way I could do those characters. I don't know how other writers write. I mean, obviously, obviously I do speak to some writers, and I don't. Funnily enough, you'd be amazed how little we talk about method, but particularly at that sort of level. And I don't have the ability to just put down a list of facts as a story and then fit in a character around it. I cannot do that. I really can't. And that's all those years of. I mean, it's partly. I don't know whether you go into journalism because you've got a certain mindset, or journalism gives you the mindset. I don't know which way it is, or whether it's a bit of both. But I've got to know who the people are to know what happens. The characters are the plot. It's what people do. I really could not do it the other way around. Absolutely could not. And that necessity of being inside someone's brain and seeing the world as they see it, and completely switching off myself. And as I said, it is real and it is physical. I couldn't co-write something because it's all got to happen in my head. I can't sit down with someone else and externalize it. I've got to get in there, shut out everything else, and just be that character for that scene, and then see how, knowing what the other characters are like, get that interaction going, and then how the other character sees it. So, I mean, there are universal things about soldiering. There are universal things about class. There are loads of things in there, and the life experiences that have impacted that with every single character. Yeah, that's how I do it. So, as I say again, if I've got one or two core things, one will do. Actually, one will do. I can extrapolate. I can reverse engineer that action or that fact into an entire character. I can do that every time with every character, and that's how I've made my money really. That's my method. People think it's because I can write. No, it's more that it's because I can read people and construct people, and I know what they'll do next. I'm obviously not well enough to make myself a millionaire, but yeah, um, I am fairly good at guessing what people will do next, and it gets easier as I get older because the data set of human experience gets larger. I probably write very differently. If I had 20 years left, then I would write very differently in 20 years. I think I say very differently. I'd probably write more characters. Let's put it that way. So I've seen even more things, but. People are people, and certain circumstances force people to behave in very similar ways. So that's how I handled soldiers. Because the one thing, sorry, because I knew I was writing military stuff, I decided I was going to write military science fiction. The one thing as a defence correspondent that I made a rule for myself is I would tell the truth about what it meant to serve, because there is so much garbage out there, both in journalism and in fiction. This stereotype of people in uniform, which is ridiculous. Veterans and serving see this in my writing. They know what I'm trying to do. They know that I'm trying to keep it absolutely honest. And I'm not glorifying it, and I'm not sugarcoating it, and I'm not painting anyone as baby killers or any of that garbage. But most people, most civilians now in the West, do not have any direct contact with people in uniform. If you go back to not long before I was born, everybody either knew someone who had served in World War II, they'd served in World War II, or their neighbours had. They all knew people who had died. They all knew people who had come back with stories to tell. And there was a much closer connection between civilian and military. Now, it's so compartmentalised that humans will fill in an information vacuum. We're great pattern recognisers, and we fill in the gaps all the time. We don't always fill them in right. If the only information you get about what it means to be a soldier or an airman or a sailor or a marine or any of this, if the only thing you get is someone who's picked up their knowledge of the armed forces from watching bad movies, and then just repeating this, and I could name movies and get very upset about them, but I won't. And you can see how this complete mythology starts to spread because nobody really knows soldiers anymore. Most people are not, it's not everybody knows. The reaction to war films just after World War II, if you look at the quality of the accuracy of those, I'm thinking of things like The Cruel Sea, made just not long after World War II about a Flower Class corvette. Harrowing film based on Nicholas Montserrat's book and it's so accurate. It is so accurate because the public knew what it was about. They actually knew a lot of the language, they knew a lot of the jargon, and if anyone had stepped outside of that, they would have been hammered by audiences. Now they've got nothing to compare it with. They really haven't. And no, being realistic, you can't expect someone to go out and do a PhD level of research just so they can watch a movie. So I try and tell the truth as far as humanly possible, um, within my experience. And if I haven't got the experience, then I'll at least, being a journalist, I can always find someone who has. People, particularly veterans, very generous with their time and their specialist advice. I've made some wonderful friends that way, and I owe it to them to tell the truth because it may be the one thing that someone will read before they vote, and they will not make decisions based on someone else's half-assed fiction. That at least they will understand, why people go to war and what they do on our behalf, what they have to endure. So yeah, I wouldn't call that a message. That's a standard.
Did they ever talk to you about Gears of War 4 when they were making it, like back in like 2014, 2015?
No,
No?
no, I didn't. At the end of three, when three ended and I finished the slab about the same time, that was it. Cut off. I don't look back. I'm very bad for that generally, but I mean, there's no point because you've got
Yeah.
no input it's something you've got no input into. There's no point fretting over it. Walk away. It's like a marriage, divorce gone. Don't just sit there worrying about it all the time. Just for everything like that, don't look back. I've done that with every job I've ever been in, even when it wasn't sort of arty creative stuff. It was like you can't go back, grasshopper. You really can't. I've only ever done that once in sort of non-fiction of the world, and that's when I went back to work for a newspaper I worked for many years earlier, and it was a completely different job. And yeah, it had its value. I mean, the thing about being a writer is bad experiences are as valid as good ones because they give you an extra perspective, and you think, oh, I know what that feels like. I know if that happens to that character, I know how that happens. And particularly bad events are like, I'm going to make a note of that because there's got to be a way to use that at some point in the future. There's got to be useful. So you end up collecting all these things. Writers will admit to it. A lot of writers will that they have made notes during their worst times in their lives because it's going to feed you one day, and it's true. It is true. Yeah, I mean that's part of coming to terms with bad things that happen to you as well. Is that nothing is wasted. No experience is wasted.
Yeah, it's always good to remember that. But the reason I asked that question was because in the beginning of Gears of War 4, there is a sequence where they're kind of like giving you the history of Gears of War up to that present day. So it's like it'll be a scene from the Pendulum Wars, then it'll be a scene from E-Day, then it'll be a scene from like the end of Gears of War 3. The scene from E-Day, like we never had any information on that, so that could have been whatever. The scene from Gears of War 3, we played that, so we know that that's like what happened. But the scene from Pendulum Wars, it was like changed around and like retconned a bit. So that's why I was wondering if you had like any say in it, because I know in the books when Dom is there, he's like a commando. He's like they're going in, they're going
Yeah.
silent until like shit hits the fan and everything. But within the game, it's like action all the way through. It feels like a D-Day type of situation. Yeah, I was just wondering if you had any input on that. Like, do you think something like that? I guess for like Gears of War, like gameplay wise, do you think changing something like that is beneficial for the game? Because in Gears of War isn't necessarily a game of like sneaking around and collecting this information.
Yeah.
It's more of like a big bombastic type of deal whenever it comes to the combat. Do you think a change like
I
that
mean,
would have been
yeah, I'm
necessary?
just trying to think what I mean the sort of raid on Asfo on the Asfo Point facility. I mean, there's a lot of action going on, but it's not. There's a full infantry, tank, and air battle going on. The Asfo Point raid is initially when Mike Cap said, "We don't know anything about it. Make it up yourself." Our first thing I looked to was the raid on Saint Nazaire, World War II, the greatest commando raid of all. There are a couple of raids like this. Hang on, let me just open this up and have a look. Jeremy Clarkson did a really good documentary on it. It's known as the greatest commando raid of World War II. It was, yes, it's Saunders there that I'm thinking of. How could I not remember that? Hang on, 28th of March. That's the one. That is it. And it was basically destroying a dock, and the unlikely nature of commandos. And these were not massive surfer dudes, seals or anything like that. These were just ordinary blokes, and some were academics, and some were clerks, and some were miners, and all sorts. And it's an astonishing raid. And when the time I went through it, I thought that's never going to work in fiction because it's unbelievable. So I stripped it down to just basically a sort of distraction attack while the commandos went in, because there was too much in the real world to fit into even gears. It exceeded gears. So I think the action could still be done, but the question is whether you've got the gameplay to go with it. I don't think it's unusual in a game. I mean, as long as you're not changing the facts of the story, like Carlos survives there or something like that, I just accept it. That is what games are, because I see games that are sort of historical reenactment, and you can play, I don't know, Nobunaga's troops against the Romans, or I don't know. I don't know if that exists, but I've seen that sort of thing where it's a pure anachronism, and it's there for the gameplay,
Hmm.
and characters that wouldn't be there. But I mean, you accept that with games, there are fantasy bits. Not having seen it, I'm not going to be critical about it. Obviously, I think action and gameplay can be put into anything, and if you're going to make gameplay out of it, I'd probably pick a different bit. But then I'm like that, and I mean, certainly some of the things that with Gears 3, there was one level where characters were going in to blow stuff up, and I said, "Why are they blowing it up? It's empty. Don't you think they'd be going and defusing things, making sure there were no civilians left?" Ah, right. And that's just a different way of looking at it, but you're using very similar mechanics. So it isn't, you've still got a race against time, and you've still got stuff blowing up if you get it wrong and things like that. I understand why they do it. I understand there was something in Gears 2 that had I done it without seeing the game, had I written that as a story without ever knowing that it was done in the game, I would have done it very differently. But I can understand why it was done the way it was, because a point had to be made fairly quickly, and you didn't have a whole book to do it in. So yeah, I mean, I can understand that. If it's a conscious decision, fine. This is general. This is general. If it's a conscious decision, then that's fine. If people can justify it to themselves and say, well, actually, we can't do that because, but we can't ignore that particular thing, so let's just do it slightly differently. Because I mean, the very premise of it is you can get killed in a game, and then you can be back. So
Yeah.
you're not, that's the point. Once you've accepted that, you can't be too strict about continuity. You can't, because that's the whole premise of it. That you can refight that war, and that the whole fabric of reality is different for games. It's when people haven't checked it that I think that's the only time that I could get annoyed. But they wouldn't admit that. There is nobody who would admit that to me. So
Yeah.
you'll say no, I go off on one. But no, I wouldn't have seen it as a problem. I'm far more worried about changes in characters. When characters, I mean, this is true generally, that if a character is a certain way and then when they come back they're a totally different personality, unless they've had a head injury, I'm going to object.
Yeah.
You know, there are some things that some characters would not do, whether that's Donald Duck or Hannibal Lecter. There are some things they would not do, and you got to stick with that because it goes to the heart of the character, and it's about understanding the character. It gets down to the fine detail, because I can remember, we'd have a lot of discussions on Gears 3, and they say, "Oh, so and so says he does that, and then he does that," and I said, "No, he wouldn't do that. That particular character," I said, "he might be difficult, he might be a lot of other things, but he is never going to do that to a civilian. No, that's a different character. Okay, fine. Because you have to make your case. And at that level of detail, I mean, you can get away with a lot less detail in a game, but when people care enough about it to have those debates, you're going to get a better game out of it. Because if everyone says, "Oh, story doesn't matter," actually, yes, it does. Characters matter, because otherwise, if characters and story did not matter, if you break down what games really are, the various things that you can do in a game, blow stuff up, find stuff, I mean, once you get that list down, there's very few things you can do. And the only way you get engaged in something enough to make it worth it and going through all these difficult levels is if you start to engage with the story and the characters and feel there's something at stake. I mean, it's not real, but it's like, why do you watch a movie to the end? when in fact you could just start at the beginning and say, okay, so and so dad does this. Rick's old love comes back. He doesn't. He doesn't want to rekindle it. He helps her get away from the Nazis with her husband, and then he goes off to join the Free French. Is that Casablanca? No. I mean, it's you want to see the agony. You want to see it work because finding out what's happened uh, is no substitute for living it. And I think that's why story and characters matter. I think gamers know that. I mean, gamers instinctively know that. Why do people like some games more than others? Why are people interested in the characters?
With Gears of War 3, was that one of the hardest experiences you've had in terms of writing a story because there were so many people in the project having say in the story?
Um, the thing is, it's when the assets are already there. That's where the money's been spent. And any writer, I mean, lots of games writers will tell you this, that the writer was always brought in relatively late, and I was brought in later than anybody for various reasons I can't go into. It was, can you do this? You've never done it before. No, that was me who said that. I said I've never done it before, but I'll give it a go. I've never written a game, let alone AAA, but I know how they work. And I said yes. And it's a matter of what they're all very committed to, fitting stuff around that. I mean, the thing is, we'd worked together so closely since part way through two. Even though I wasn't directly involved in two, I was still aware of what was going on and what would need to be done in the future. And it was quite late in the process after I'd written some books, and it was like, do you want to do that as well? Same with the comics. Do you want to do that as well? It was like, is the Pope Catholic? Yes, of course I want to do it. The comics were the big thing I wanted. It gave me my break in comics, and I knew what I had to live with, and that's fine. You know what it is going in. You might have done everything very differently, but no, it was fine. And remember, I wasn't arguing with other writers. I was, I say arguing, debating with other writers. It's everyone. It's the developers. It's sitting down with Cliff and the devs and all that, and saying, what about this? What about that? That's different because they are bringing something totally fresh and different. That's what I say. I love working with other disciplines. I love working with artists because it's different and they get something different out of me. Comics are artists; they can strike sparks off me. It's one of my. I mean, use comics as an example. Sorry, I'm not changing the topic. It is so striking with comics. I do very detailed scripts because I didn't know how to do an undetailed script. When I was given this to do, I just went back to my TV days and I'd do a storyboard, mainly to communicate. Although obviously I wouldn't do a storyboard for documentaries and things. But I knew that I had to specify certain things. So I had a look at comics and thought, what do I need to specify there? I got I got a comics template for Scrivener, and I had a look through. And I thought, right, okay, so I know what that character is going to say. I know the shot size. I know the angle. I know the lighting. This was TV stuff. So I put it all in, and the colours. I'd say, this is the red thing. It's badly lit. You get a bit of you get a bit of backlight from the door. It's I don't know, two shot. Next one is a reverse. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm using TV terms, but this is how I did it. And one of the artists said it's seen directed scripts before, but never one that detailed. And he said, I thought for a minute, oh my God, what am I going to do? He said, but it produced something different from me. And I said, when I saw your interpretation, this is it. When artists start interpreting things, however closely they stick to your script, it's totally different. And the greatest joy I had every time, and I'd go back to it in a heartbeat, is having done your script and turned it in, and the artist then sends you the pencils, which is my favourite stage, and you see what they have seen from your words and all your direction. And 9 times out of 10, it's just, even though they've stuck to shot size, angle, all these sorts of things, it's a new world. It's an insight into someone else's brain who's read your stuff, and it doesn't look like what you saw, and it's fantastic. And I mean, I particularly got this when I worked on GI Joe with Steve Kurth. Oh, I absolutely love working with Steve. Once we got ourselves sorted out and we knew where we were both coming from, it was a joy. And one thing he was terrifically good at that I didn't see people using him for was a portrait. He was very good at capturing people's personalities and their faces. So we went for the big splash pages of some of the characters from it in very illustrative situations. Like, I said to him, can we have a Boyhood of Raleigh between Grigor, the freedom fighter, and I think it's Isaac, isn't it? Who's a sort of cobra young officer, and it looks like this is the grandfather explaining something to his sort of 18, 19-year-old son, or however old Isaac is, and they're actually building a bomb. But it looks like he's sort of telling him tales of when he was in the Navy or something. Uh, but he could do it so perfectly. And even the people, even the faces in the background, like there was something he did for some other comic, and I said, so and so is in the foreground, mid shot, but in the background you can see a group of soldiers talking, and the detail he had put in it. This face of one particular guy was fascinating. I said, "Can you save him?" I said, "I'll write him a backstory. That's the guy I want to interview. That is a fascinating face," and he could do that, and it made me a better writer. Working with artists, and I felt the same way with working with different disciplines on the game. Is you see it from a different perspective. You see different elements of their creativity and their logic, and you come out better the other end. You really do.
Obviously everybody's talking to each other for each project for Gears of War 1, 2, and 3. But Gears of War 3 is, I guess, in my opinion, and I think it's even like objective in this case, where 3 is the story that's the most concise. It's the story that has like an actual drive from the get go and everything, which like Gears of War 1 and 2 are still like phenomenal, but a thing that me and like some people I speak to, what we look for is like a drive and character motives. Obviously, that's what you would want in a story, and Gears of War 3 really like gets that itch, especially since like in Gears of War 2 there was Dom, but Marcus in both games 1 and 2 was just kind of like soldier guy, you know. So I think in 3 that's what really brought him together to the point where even like I remember having conversations with my brother where to him Marcus was kind of just like gruff and tough soldier guy, but then in 3 that's where he like really was characterized right there. And I think whatever you whatever you guys did behind the scenes, all the speaking, and just like the amount of work that you guys put into it brought probably like the best story within the Gears franchise. I think that did really good.
I'm
Gears
I'm
2 and
glad
3
it.
are up there.
I'm so glad it hit the spot. But, I mean, one of the things is when you're coming to the end of something, and this was coming to the end of that particular story arc because we knew what was going to happen at the end. Did they or did they not save the world, and who survived? It certainly drives you on. There are things you've got to cover. There are things you've got to make sense of. I mean, the whole thing about who was going to die. We had a lot of debates about those, and there were a few people who can I just say that I saved from certain death. No, I said there's no point killing that person because otherwise we won't have X, Y, and Z. But certainly, there was me and Cliff. If I remember this correctly, now I don't trust my memory, and I don't think anyone else should trust their memory because everyone remembers something different. But I can remember sitting there and I looked at Cliff, and Cliff looked at me. We said, "Dom's got to go," and I was like, "No, no, no, can't do Dom." Yes, you got to do Dom because and it was a perfectly logical thing. That was Dom being Dom. That was where Dom was going. If you'd read the books, you could see where Dom was going. His only reason for staying alive, once he had, once he had basically killed his wife. See, that's the thing that would have been different in a novel. He would have done something totally different in a novel. It would have been equally sad, but there would have been no punctuation or action in it. But Dom's only got Marcus then to live for, and he knows if he's alive and Marcus is dead as well, he can't live with that. And also, he's a guy who thinks he's going to heaven, and that possibly helps. But the thought of having lost everybody and then losing Marcus, he will sacrifice himself for that because it will stop his own pain as well. And that's why it was logical that he did it. And I think once you've got something of that magnitude, I'm not saying you've got to always pick an important character to kill, but what you don't do is make sure that nobody can get killed.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you take the drama out of it, and it makes it look like only insignificant people die. And I don't like, see, that's me thinking that. It's a nasty message there that only the red shirts die. You've got to know that heroes die too, because that's the reality. And life is full of that. And me being a miserable ratbag, that's what I wanted to see in there, sort of thing. How would Marcus react? Very differently to how he reacted to Carlos, at least visually, on the surface. He was sort of 20 when he lost Carlos. That's his first. He's seen a few awful things, but that's his first experience. And then by the time you see him in 3, he has just been ground down by constant death and seeing terrible things. And this was one of the things about the whole experience of Gears 1, 2, 3 and the books and the comics for me was, why does Mr. Perfect decide to do what he does? Punch out Hoffman, punch out his CO, not just ignore him, punch him out, walk to, take something with him for the targeting laser, take a Raven with his screw in it without telling them where he's going. These are all separate, shocking decisions. Why does he do that and then go off to see his dad? Now, this is a professional soldier, an Embry Star soldier. He's got the highest award for gallantry. Everyone respects him. And yet he does that. They lose the city. Loads of men die as a result of him doing that because they can't mount the counterattack. And he accepts it. He accepts that he broke the law and he deserves what he gets. He's expecting a death sentence. He gets 40 years. Now, why would he do that? And I remember saying I had this discussion with Rod Ferguson. I said, he said, it's a redemption story. I said, yes, but why does he get to that stage? That's what I've got to show in the books, which is why a lot of the slab shows the final straws. And it's when he loses, I think he starts to really snap when he can't save that engineer who's doing the concrete pour. He's got his hand and the guy just falls into all these thousands of gallons of concrete and there's nothing he can do. And he's devastated. And I thought I've got to show. I've shown throughout all the sort of cumulative effect in the books of how he loses people, and he feels he can't save the world, and he feels he ought to be able to because he's Marcus Phoenix, and he's got responsibilities. And there's a bit where they fly away from this concrete pour, and there's the engineer's comrade. So what happened? He says, and he's saying, I'm sorry, I couldn't save him. And that's the nearest you get to him having an outburst. But he gets up, and Dom watches him walk aft in the. Sorry, you don't say aft in the aircraft, do you? Sorry, getting a bit navy there. He goes into the tail of the Raven, and Dom hears this terrific crash. He's punching the bulkhead. And the guy comes out, and Marcus comes out again, sort of flexing his hand. No one says anything. Dom knows what he's done. It's what he does all the time, and he's just like, that's what he does every time he sees someone die now. He's on the edge. And then he goes to see his dad, and of course, he's forced to go and see his dad. And Adam wants to confess that he's been a naughty boy, and he actually knew about E-Day, and he can't do it. And he looks at his son, and he just sees he's old before his time, and it's broken him, and he says, I lost a guy today, Dad. And that's what really tips him. And the only rationale that I could come up with that would make a man with that sort of military record and that sense of responsibility just throw over the traces is that he's snapped. He cannot lose anyone else. He's lost Carlos. He's lost his comrades. He's lost his mum. He's lost. Dom's lost all his family. There's so much pain and loss, and that was Carlos. That was Marcus's family member. He was an honorary Santiago. He was probably closer. He was probably closer to Dom's parents than he was to his own when he was a kid. And that's why he snaps, and that's why he punches out. And what that whole punching out thing told me, I am sure that's what he did. I'm sure that's in which game is that in when you see him do that, or at least it's spoken about. He actually punches Hoffman. He's got a
in
terrible temper.
in Gears of War 3, there was a DLC in development that would
Yes, that
show
was
that, but in the
yeah,
beginning it was like a dream sequence, and you didn't see the
yeah.
punch out, but you saw the fight at the Phoenix estate, holding the locust off.
Yes, right. That's what I'm thinking of because it must have been mentioned in that because I don't remember adding the bit about punching him out. I think that was already in there, and it's like, well, it's clear he's got a temper. because there's no need to punch Hoffman. He could have just walked away from him. So that temper played a role in everything. And he's resentful of so many things that the world has done to people he loves, and he's not going to let it happen again. And why does Hoffman abandon him? Is that was just that turned out to be just something they stuck in there because it was a good start. It was a terrific start that domesticate and rescue him, but it wasn't enough for the novels. So again, a conversation with Mike Capps and said, "Do you mind if I alter Hoffman a bit?" As I said earlier, and I had to think, right, if I'm Hoffman, how do I respond to this? What's in my head when I'm Hoffman? And I've done something really bad at Anvil Gate as well, so I'm not completely blameless. Although I didn't lose people, I basically betrayed, the honour of the surrender and killed the people I was surrendering to in a horrible way. But he was told to hold that at any cost, and the cost was his conscience. So what is he now? He's not a monster. He's had to make hard decisions. So the way I reconcile it for the slab is that he can't afford to keep pouring people into that particular battle on the off chance that Marcus is still alive. He's thinking it's one man, and I know he's Marcus, and I know he's 2-6 RTI, he's our boy. But, there's going to be absolute chaos if the people who still resent him for having lost Jacinto and what happened was it Chancery Bridge, wasn't it? They're not going to like it. What's that going to do to morale? I can't send people to their death purely for one guy. He wouldn't want that. And he feels terrible about it. And that's why he allows Dom to do what he's done and deliberately colludes with it and lets him go off, which is known, remember, because someone sees it happen and says, "You're not going to let him do that." And he says, "No, I know, he's so disobedient." Isn't that terrible? Just lets him do it. So that would have, knowing, you can imagine what that would be like within another regiment. Guess what happened? Guess what Hoffman did? He let him do that. He just let him go off with her. He let him go off with the bot. He let him go and release Phoenix. And it becomes a totally different story from that side of them. Whereas Marcus feels possibly he's been abandoned, but he deserves it. He thinks he deserves it. Hoffman feels terrible that he had to do it. And of course, by the time he's really thinking about it, he's done what we've all done, which is erasing our memories, rewriting our memories, which we do all the time. And by the time it's got that, he's now, by the time Marcus is out, he feels incredibly guilty because all that guilt is from all the other things he's done in his life. And he's a man who takes on guilt. I think at the end of the slab it says, his guilt is a raft, and he just piles stuff on it's going to take him down, so he's got to get rid of some of it, which is why he apologises to Marcus so often, because he genuinely feels he abandoned him, because he's conveniently forgotten the fact that it would have been really bad if he had done it, because he would probably have lost all the people he sent in, and the amount of resentment in the rest of the army for doing this for a guy who cost them Jacinto and hundreds of lives in their own regiment. It was the 4th Firemen's, wasn't it? Which is Baird's regiment, of course, isn't it? I'd have to look that up again because I should remember by now. But it's about what the character does.
Yeah.
He's rewritten it, and again that goes back to saying I don't really mind what you've got to change as long as you stick with the character in anything else. If you want to make it less of a stealth operation at Asfo Point, then fine. If the gameplay requires that, as long as it doesn't change what happened, and basically it doesn't. It's just a different tactics. So yeah. Sorry, I answered the wrong question there. I do apologise.
Oh no, you answered both. I really, oh man, I wish you knew like the plot points and stuff about Gears of War 4 and 5 because they're so divisive in the community. But personally, I
Right.
think Gears 4 and 5 are, while they're not like phenomenal and like the best put together, I think there's enough meat and potatoes for both of them to like chew and enjoy. And in my opinion, like my favorite story for Gears of War is Gears of War 4. That is one of my favorite stories. But I think the best one is either Gears 2 or 3. But my favorite is Gears of War 4. That one is super nice. It's really cool. But it's so divisive because obviously people are attached to Delta Squad. They love Marcus, they love Dom, Baird, Cole.
Yeah.
So like moving forward 20 years and then having these brand new characters, like yes, one of them is the son of Marcus Phoenix. But the other two characters, they're like brand new characters entirely, not connected to anybody within the lore. And they have these like different tones. Like Gears of War
Mm.
1, 2, and 3, it's like a desolate wasteland. There's like nothing but destruction, and when it's not destruction, it's like a haunting silence. With Gears of War 4, since like they pushed beyond peace. Like they're in like such a time of peace that they have like futuristic stuff, like actual like robots and stuff like that to help fight or to help build and stuff. But now, instead of like whenever the enemies are near, instead of knowing that something is going to crash through the wall anytime soon, now it's more like it feels more alien, like tendrils on the walls, different feel, like it's like glowing, it's pulsating, tendrils on the walls, things are slimy, nasty. I think that's a cool way to evolve the series. And narratively, a lot of really cool things happen, in my opinion, within the story, because it is still like a story about family, but like two different sides of it. It's so divisive in the series, or in the community. I'm the biggest defender. I love like the series as a whole. Oh man, I just wish you knew more about the like the plot points in that, so I could ask you
Yeah.
certain questions about stuff in that, because
Yeah.
Kate, like the character I mentioned before, Kate Diaz, she she does and feels a lot like Dom, but for some reason people love Dom, and those people who love Dom, they do not like Kate, like at all. And I'm just wondering, from like a writer's perspective, they both had to kill a loved one. They both lost everybody around them. They both are dealing with these like traumatic experiences. They both defy orders to save people, but for some reason Dom is a fan favorite, and people will constantly like excuse what he does, whether or not he's breaking the rules. But then with Kate, she she'll break rules too, just like Dom would. She'll get people kind of like giving her the go ahead implicitly, and people just don't view them the same way. Why do you think
Mm.
that is, like from a writing perspective? Like,
Oh, difficult to say. I mean, I'm probably the worst person to ask for this because I've got I approach things from a totally different point of view. One thing I am not very good at is jumping ahead in things because I
mhm,
believe in the organic growth of a story. Unless I see the characters walk all the way through it and walk with them, well, how do I know where they reach? You know, the point they reach. And this is the problem with a lot of games, and a lot of movies or even books, is that you jump a long way ahead without knowing what's went on in the middle in detail,
mhm,
because that's inevitable. I'm one of these people who actually just prefers to do a one long linear story with no breaks. You can have short breaks, but they're not so big that years have passed because too much happens in that time. And I have turned down work on the basis of, do you want to come back and, as well, this is another one entirely. Do you want to come back and do X, Y, and Z? And I said, it's just too far ahead in the timeline for me. I either do it from the end of that book or I don't do it at all,
yeah,
because I can't work that way. Also, because I am afraid of what happens when you come out with arbitrary things that you then cannot make fit because the character didn't approach it naturally. You always know it fits if you just walk the character through it, because the character will do what the character will do. If you suddenly go 20 years ahead and you throw in a lot of stuff because you need a bit of fabric and it's the wrong fabric for the story, that's what I'm afraid of, and I'm not someone who could do that. That is not what I can do.
mhm,
And if people, as I say, I've been asked to do it for other things, and it's like I can't do it, mate. Sorry, I just can't get there. And I'm not being precious. I just know how I write now, and anything else is just I wouldn't be able to produce the results that I do by going through the character. I mean, that's what I do. I basically live the characters. Make those characters live on the page, and it's only what they do that gives me the story. I can't determine it in advance. I mean, there have been books where I really didn't know who was going to die at the end, or even that they were going to die at all, until I suddenly thought, well, they definitely do that. Oh dear. And when you write like that, you are, although you're not a hostage to fortune in that you've created things that shouldn't be there, you have to go through it to get there to start with.
yeah,
So you're always committed to continuing stories, and that puts you in a very awkward position because if you're doing licensed stuff, a lot of them don't want to do that. And I always feel as a consumer that things jump too far ahead. I don't want to see some. If I'm watching a TV series and suddenly it jumps 5 years, oh come on, well, you've robbed me. Where's my 5 years? I want to know where they got there.
mhm,
so I am sort of consistent whether I'm writing or consuming. I do think that it's difficult introducing new characters. It's always difficult in any medium that someone hasn't seen before, and it depends. It's a matter of taste. It's a matter of how close they are to the main story. I mean, bear in mind the greatest example of being able to do this seamlessly was a police procedural called Taggart, Scottish. It was set in Glasgow and it's detectives. It's a classic police series in the UK. And the guy who played Taggart passed away. And they brought in a completely new guy to fill his job. And it was still called Taggart. And it still carried on, but they didn't pretend he was Taggart. It was just like, I'm sure there must have been some episodes where people were saying he's not the same as the old guy. There's been a murder. If you say murder to anyone, they'll know it's Taggart. That's the sort of thing. The rolled R was quite spectacular. But if you can do that with Taggart, it was about introducing one new element. I think if you start producing lots of new elements, and I've seen series do that, and I've lost interest in them. I don't know. If you're asking would I've done something differently, I'd have to sit down and watch it, and watch all the cines and see a bit of the gameplay recorded, and say, well, I wouldn't have done that, or I would have done that, or not, or fine, or not fine. But it's just my opinion, and my opinion is worth sweet FA, to be absolutely
Yeah.
honest. If I'm not involved in it, it's not my. It is. I've got no right to comment on it. I don't know what went on. Um, Gears will always be in my head. Gears in my head will always be that up to the end of the Battle on Azura. But the questions I want to ask are totally different. I I would want to see what happened immediately afterwards, the
Hmm.
immediate aftermath, how they coped with being split up, the detail of that, because I'm a detail person, and all the detail that went into the books. I sat down and I worked out numbers. Now, I was horrified at many numbers I'd actually put in because I always avoid numbers because there's always someone who'll argue about them. There was a reader who was saying, actually, it's not that. But I really worked it out. I knew how many calories they had going from the food supply in Jacinto. When I talk about their rations, I know what those rations are. I sat down and worked it out. I did all that number crunching. Yes, I'm a very sick puppy. And someone said to me, you are out of your mind, for goodness sake. Couldn't you put your efforts into something worthy like splitting the atom? I said, no, it matters. I can't tell the story till I know the facts. I've got to know these things. Otherwise, the whole thing falls apart. I mean, if you've got too big a population for the amount of calories you could reasonably produce to keep people alive, I was going back through World War II records of calorie consumption and how they worked out these things. So that's the last time in this country that happened. And I really worked everything out. I even drew a map, but I swear that will never be. That's just been shared between me and Andrew. I said, when you're wondering what I'm talking about, I said this is roughly how I see Jacinto and the surrounding area, just so you know. And I've got to do that, otherwise I don't know when I'm writing. I mean, I've got to see it in the book, so I've got to know which way they're facing to get
Hmm.
them to move through the story
Yeah.
and all that. So I'm the worst person to say jump ahead 5 years, jump ahead 10 years, jump ahead 20 years. I mean, if you know the end of a story as well, it shapes. There is backflow. If you think of a story the way I do, which is as a flowing series of consequences, it will keep flowing, and the eddies may go off in different directions. But if it hits a dam or a brick wall, that water behaves differently and it flows back, and that means it's affecting what you're. You can't ever have a pure story not knowing where the end is once you know the end, because the consequences are already visible to you. So that's why I shy away from any extensions. I like to grind through every single stage, which is why I don't comment about 4 and 5, and I've avoided really sort of getting into it because your focus is somewhere else. That sounded like a feeble excuse, didn't it?
No, no, no. I don't know if somebody else would think about it like that, but I don't think it was because there's this I don't know, because of like everything Marcus went through. I just want to, and in terms of characters and stuff, would you rather kill a character off when you're writing, when you're writing stuff? If you were to choose which character to kill, would you rather kill a character that has a chance for redemption, but he's done so many reckless things in the past, or would you rather kill a character whose death would be just like meaningless, like people wouldn't really care, doesn't affect the story, doesn't affect the player, they're not really invested? Which one would you rather kill for like?
Uh, that's actually two separate questions there, and it depends which lens I'm using.
Mhm.
In terms of writing a story, I would I only kill a character when it looks like exactly what would happen, and that could be anybody. Um, make it if you make it, and also there's the general rule of drama is there has to be real risks to the main characters, and if you know they're not going to die and they can't be killed, because there are IPs I worked for who said you can do anything you like, but so and so cannot be killed, and it's like, oh well, that's half your arsenal gone. That's half your because sometimes you do need to, just remind people, as you say, heroes die, and that's the power again, as I mentioned before about East Asian cinema and anime is that you frequently see heroes die and
Hmm.
halfway through. So, they take the risks and the emotional impact is enormous when you do that. But just doing it for the sake of enormous impact. See, I don't mind. Everyone's got their method, and my method is to do causality. Causality is easy in the real world because no matter what you do, even if you don't know how it works, if you light a match, you don't have to work out where that bit of smoke goes to and what chemical consequences it has. It just does, and you don't have to do it. Whereas you have to do that in fiction, or I do, to make sense of a real world. I have to create a complete causality in my head, and I can't do it like a real functioning universe, obviously, but I can do a lot more. And I think a lot of people, and that's why I say, well, I'm detail conscious, and some things are inevitable, and I can't avoid them. Because once I do that, my whole fabric of reality falls to the ground. It's like I intervene. It becomes a bit Deus Ex for me, which is why I don't do it, because I'd be stuck. If I did something that didn't follow a train of logic of causality, I wouldn't know where to go next because the chain's broken, the chain of consequences. So um, I wouldn't evaluate a character based on how important they are or how shocking they were or whatever. It would be what would naturally happen. Because then something else will come out of that you didn't necessarily see the first time. If a character dies and someone else takes over their position and does something heroic, or whoever is there tries to save the person who's inconsequential. There's all sorts of stuff that comes out of what I call the artificial reality of what goes on in my brain. So that's what drives me. I wouldn't have a preference. But if somebody inconsequential died, people react to it because people within the game must react to it. It's like I used to have this thing about if you see a raven go down, you are going to react. Not only is it your ride out, but it's someone you know, and it may be someone you know really well. So no one just shrugs it. I mean, you can park things for later, but you're gonna feel something, and you're gonna make some sort of gesture or comment. Uh, and if not at the time it happens, then afterwards, it only takes one line to do that. Like, oh damn, I can't believe that Frank's gone or whatever. That sort of thing. Yeah, Frank was great, and then move on. You don't have to spend the whole thing doing it, but you do have to register the fact that terrible things have happened. You, are you asking that as a writer's choice or a player choice?
I think
What would I rather write, or what would I rather play?
I think in this instance, writer's choice.
Um, Again, the same rules would apply. What would naturally happen? I really would. Seriously, that's how dull I am. I am absolutely robotic about this. I do what would happen. I extrapolate from real life, from this. Well, it isn't real life. I extrapolate from the reality, and I don't deviate. If the reality doesn't suit what I want, I still stick with it. I'm stuck with it. I mean, this is why sometimes people say, isn't it difficult to write in someone else's universe? And I said, no, because it's difficult to write in any universe, including your own, once you've made decisions. Now, some people will wreck on their own stuff. I don't. I really don't, because then my whole system collapses. My whole system collapses, and I can't take a step forward. If well, 9 times out of 10, the characters that I create and write do things I'm not expecting. I mean, I have to have a rough idea where I think they're going to go to start with, just to basically get on the train, because you can't buy the ticket until you at least go up to the ticket office and say, give me a ticket to, and specify somewhere. If you just went up to, if you want to take a train journey, this is the analogy I've tried to explain to people. It's probably the best one, I think, of what goes on in my head. I can't just start writing blindly. I know where something's happening. I know who would be there because of where it is and when it is. And then I think, right, where's this going to end? Because I've got to at least make some sort of stab at it just to get the train moving. which is if I can't go to the station and hand them my money and say, take me somewhere interesting, they'll say, sorry, madam, where do you want to go? You know, you only got these destinations. So I say, all right, give me a ticket to there. Give me a ticket to I don't know Bristol Temple Meads or wherever. And I get on the train. And I don't really want to go to. I don't know if I want to go to Bristol Temple Meads or not. But then someone gets on at the next station, and we get talking, and they're quite interesting. And they say, well we're going off to so and so. Have you ever seen it? I said, no. No, do you mind if I tag along? And I end up getting off at the next station and going somewhere I hadn't planned because I'm following them. The interesting character who gets on at the next station is your character, and the character tells me what's going to happen next, and I'm happy to follow them. And even if I really wanted to go to Bristol Temple Meads, I would still not go because the characters have precedence. If they and most of the time they do that, but at least I've got the story moving and I've got a reaction going. So this character's got off and they've gone somewhere else. So who would logically be there? Why are they going there? You see how this gets constructed.
Yeah,
Now
that's
bear in mind
fascinating.
this
I never thought about it like that.
it is sort of like post. It's almost like rationalising after the event because I don't know how many writers work things out like this. I'll say I'm very robotic. I've got to go through it logically, and I'm sure there are. I didn't know that I did it until a reader asked me because I just sat down and I thought, well, I've taken on this job and I've got to do this. I've got to write a story. Okay, what happens there? And I was doing this subconsciously, and it was only when a reader said, "How do you do that? How do you think this up?" And I thought, yeah, it's a good point. And I've spent 20 years working it out. It all makes sense now that it's just picking up things on the assembly line. And if a character does that, then they're likely to be someone who will do this. And then you just add all that together and you can imagine. I can't even draw a diagram of it because there's too many things that interlink. But I know and I can feel when they interlink and where I need to bring them in. You know, I know that character, if they, I don't know, get off at whatever that station is and see someone they know that it's going to be bad news because they would need to avoid that person. I don't know if that's a sort of crude example, but all this stuff just floats up from this massive data set swirling around in my brain like a sort of tea leaves at the bottom of a pot. And just something at the top will happen and the tea leaf will float up and connect itself. And another tea leaf and another tea leaf. And suddenly you've got this molecular shape, which you didn't know was there. And I say this is how characters happen. Characters happen for me in seconds. Yeah, it really is a very short process. I might have to do some research to do some real backstory. Like, okay, if I think they've come from that regiment, what did they do in that particular year? What deployments were they on? Go back and have a look. So there's that to it, but the actual nuts and bolts of it, I see the character pretty well straight away.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, especially the train analogy. I never
Yeah,
even thought of character creation like that. That's really interesting. Um,
yeah. See, that's why I can't choose which characters live and die. It's got to be if I'm at a situation, who's the most likely to take the risk or get something wrong? And it's nothing to do with what they've done. If you go back to your example of the redemption thing, should someone who's done terrible things and redeems themselves, should they be saved? The question is, what is the story afterwards? If that person who did something terrible and wants redemption and does something sacrificial, if they die, then there's a sense of well, he had it coming. At least he died knowing he had tried to repair what he did. Or if he survives, how do people react to that? It's like, why was it him who died? It's what other people do, watching the consequences and saying, you let you let little Bobby die. You let him take that shot, and you're the one who's got us in this mess. You see what I mean? It sprouts its own stories. It scatters them around it. So it's not just a simple choice of uh, what I, as yeah, from a writer's perspective, whether that guy goes or not. I mean, clearly everyone likes visceral. If you're playing a game, I imagine it's very visceral. If you really don't like a character or you think he's done something awful, just to splat him. Yeah, I understand that. That's what keeps society sane. That's what stops us doing it for real. And I know it is. I mean, there is a lot of. I've always felt, and I think studies have borne me out that violent games in particularly don't encourage. They actually let off steam for people, and there might be some marginals who would have done it for real who just feel that they've vented their spleen about what's got to them. So yeah, but that's not how I can write. I have to follow. the chain of consequences.
Yeah, that does make sense. If you were to add any weapon to the Gears of War universe, I'm assuming for you it would have to fit contextually, but no matter whether it be gravity gun, type of grenade launcher that blows up cities, doesn't matter what kind of weapon it is. What kind of weapon would you add?
And that's a good one because I would almost certainly go for improvised munitions. I'd like to see something whereby you've got absolutely nothing and you have to cobble something together. Find the elements that you need to make a pipe gun. Sorry, you can tell when I'm. If you can hear the rustling, you'll know I do this quite a lot. Make your own grenade. Um, make your own crossbow. You know, when you're stuck, the the ability to go and find a few discoverables and make something yourself there and then. That would fascinate me because that would satisfy my. I mean, it might slow down the action a bit, but it would fascinate me in terms of um, what I could look for and what I could do with it, and the sort of risk, and especially if you do it against the clock, it would. Yeah, that's what I'd go for. And it's probably I'm the only person probably in the world who wants to do that, but that would amuse me greatly. Anyway, that was enormous fun. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. It's just been nice to be able to talk to someone in the real world and a Gears fan. It's always rewarding.
Yeah, no problems. Thanks for taking time out of your day. It's really cool
Okay,
that you were able to do this.
okay. Talk to you later then.
Yeah, see ya.
Take care. Bye.
Bye bye.